We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, September 29th, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. The Chicago White Sox 2024 season is finally over. They finished 41 and 121. Easily the worst season in franchise history and even Major League Baseball modern history. But the White Sox finish on a high note of sorts. They swept the Los Angeles Angels at home and then proceeded to win their last two games of the season over the playoff-bound Detroit Tigers to finish the last week 5-1. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. This type of quote-unquote momentum, or whatever you want to call it, will not carry over to spring training. But maybe because of how hard the current roster played for interim manager Grady Sizemore helps his case when it's time to interview for the managerial gig. In this episode, we'll recap the final weekend of the season for the White Sox and bravely make our Major League Baseball postseason predictions with a wild card round starting on Tuesday. Before we get started, Sunday's game also marked the final broadcast for NBC Sports Chicago, as the White Sox, Bulls, and Blackhawks will launch a new regional sports network called Chicago Sports Network. That will be starting on Tuesday, October 1st. It's a bittersweet day for many in Chicago media, as the regional sports network lasted 20 years. In the end, Comcast wanted out of the regional sports network game, and the White Sox are still very dependent on local TV revenue, so a new solution was needed. It's already known that Ozzie Guillen will be part of the new network, and reportedly that Chuck Garfien will follow Guillen over. John Schriffen and Steve Stone will still be part of the White Sox TV broadcast team for a few more years. But what's not known is the status of the White Sox Talk podcast that Garfien co-hosted with Ryan McGuffey. Jim and I have been podcasting together since the Southside Sox days back in 2014, and the White Sox Talk podcast has been by our side producing audio content for White Sox fans. Even though there was a lengthy stretch that we couldn't be more different in each other's approach or commentary, I appreciate the transparency and honesty from Garfien and McGuffey the last couple of seasons when things turned for the worse. I know it meant a lot to White Sox fans that the station owned by Jerry Reinsdorf shared similar feelings with what was going on the field. The level of access they brought to their show for a while was the only way to actually hear from White Sox players and coaches. They were a valuable resource. I hope they can figure something out, which the White Sox Talk podcast still exists in some format, and that format still includes Garfien and McGuffey. If it doesn't, and it's truly the end, thank you, Chuck and Ryan, for your hard work on that podcast. From one long-time being up White Sox podcaster to another, your work was greatly appreciated. James Fegan is still on his way home from Detroit, but joining me is Sox Machine's managing editor, Jim Margulis. And Jim, I guess we can give ourselves a pat on the back. We survived the worst season in White Sox franchise history, this being our 10th season podcasting together. No, actually 11. I'm sorry. We started in 2014. This is our 11th season. After New Year will be our 12th season. We've been doing this way too long. As I mentioned in the podcast intro, we're just a couple of beat up White Sox podcasters at this moment, but we did it, sir. We survived. Sox Machine didn't shut down, didn't close, and the podcast still moves forward.
Yay! This is my 18th season writing when you factor that in, and yeah, it was certainly the least rewarding, I think would be the way to put it. Like, there was no, everything you could be right about was basically wrong or bad or dismal. Like, nothing you really brag about. Like, there'd be times in the past where if, like, especially like, say, if Rick Hahn were trying to cut a corner and compete with, by ignoring certain positions, you could say, I don't think it's going to work. And then if it didn't work, you could at least have the satisfaction of saying, yeah, that didn't work, did it? And, feel like you're worth listening to. But here it just felt like once April happened, and especially June, I think, because he had the brief uptick when the schedule softened in May and thought, okay, they might be decent, or they might be like an ordinary form of below average. But once June came in and just decimated them again, it felt like just you could default to, oh, they're going to blow this game. Oh, they're going to lose this pitching matchup. Oh, they're going to be no hit. I guess the no hit was one thing they avoided being, but like they're going to be shut out, or they're going to be run roughshod over by these name brand pitchers, or this rookie pitcher is going to shut them down. No matter what you predicted for like how they're going to fail, they mostly did, and that gets boring. Like this is definitely the most boring season I've ever covered because of just how monotonous it was and how samey it felt. And yeah, I'm very glad it's over. I'm very glad that we can turn the page, talk about and pay attention to good baseball teams playing baseball for the next month. And then hopefully when November rolls around and the hot stove season starts, we're talking about like at least new faces at the very least, and new roster permutations, and not trying to solve the payroll issues around like the same guys who get hurt all the time. Like there will be at least there should be a different feel to it, even if the result is the same. And at that point, that's good enough.
Our 2024 season predictions that we made way back in late March. You are closer than me, Jim, with the White Sox win-loss season prediction. You had the White Sox finishing 54 and 108. I had the White Sox going 61 and 101. The White Sox somehow, again, for the second consecutive season, underperform my worst case scenario. What I thought was the worst case scenario for the White Sox was 45 out of 117, and they still underperformed that record at 41 and 121. But Herb Lawrence of CHGO tweeted out, so now this is the third consecutive year. So the White Sox 2021 go from 93 wins to 81, and then 81 wins to 61 wins, and 61 wins down to 41. Like, they can't drop another 20 wins again in 2025, Jim. Or can they?
Sounds like a challenge.
Can they go 21 and 141? Watch out, Cleveland Spiders. Here come the White Sox.
That's when we find out that like Chris Getz has not reported to the office in like 3 months, and he's just been collecting checks from some offshore location.
ChatGPT's been running the White Sox.
Pretty much, yeah.
For the first half. Oh, but I do want to say I appreciate everyone again. We've been mentioning this the last couple of podcasts, but especially for those that support us at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Thank you for all those that continue going and visiting soxmachine.com daily, participating in the comments section, listening to the podcast, engaging with us on social media. Thank you. We have survived and braved the elements of this particular season. Some of you ducked out early. I don't blame you. because the end result was not great, even though the writing was on the wall. But like our saying goes at Sox Machine, we watch the White Sox so you don't have to. And now none of us have to watch the 2024 White Sox anymore. So maybe, just maybe, brighter days are ahead.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-new Prologue EV, there's a lot that can impress you about it. There's the class-leading passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
That leads to the statement that Jerry Reinsdorf and the Chicago White Sox released around 2:30 p.m. Central Time on Sunday. An odd time to release such a statement because the White Sox were playing a baseball game, their last baseball game of the season against the Detroit Tigers. The statement is quite long, but there's a couple of points to make. At the very beginning, Jerry Reinsdorf writes to White Sox fans, quote, "I want to thank you for continuing to support the team throughout what was an embarrassing season. You all deserved better. This season's performance was completely unacceptable, and the varying reactions and emotions from our fan base are completely understandable." End quote from Jerry Reinsdorf. We'll see if that actually translates to anything, because again, Jerry is still advocating and working with Related Midwest and trying to convince Illinois politicians to move out of Bridgeport, where the White Sox have resided forever, to the South Loop because they want a fan base that is willing to spend more money than what the current White Sox fan base is willing to spend. So that opening paragraph, understanding the fans are upset and how embarrassing this was, could be eyewash. But as you wrote on SoxMachine.com, Jim, when the statement was shortly released, you pointed out something that Reinsdorf did mention in the statement, and quote, "new leadership for our analytics department, allowing us to elevate and improve every process within our organization with the focus for competing for championships," end quote. Out of everything that's been written on the national landscape and multiple media platforms, punching holes within the White Sox organization, this is still the biggest one, even though we've been talking about it on this podcast forever, since the very beginning, about just how behind the curve the White Sox are from an analytics standpoint. It's taken 121 losses for Jerry Reinsdorf to finally realize and buy into what Chris Getz is selling, which may be similar things that Rick Hahn was trying to sell when he was still within the organization, that we must go down a different path. We have to accept and put our arms around this and bring people from other organizations that can help us catch up. And it seems like Jerry is now finally open to this concept, Jim.
Yeah, it feels like he at least wants the White Sox to get good enough to where they're an ordinary kind of bad and nobody pays attention to them as closely. Like, I think really the amount of national scrutiny they drew, like, it had to have embarrassed him at least a little bit. Yeah, the White Sox are very touchy about criticism. They're very much like, oh, nobody pays attention to us. Then when people are paying attention to them, it's like, why are you paying attention to us? Like they want to be recognized for good things, but they seldom string together enough good things along to where, like, you know, they create momentum, positive momentum. It's usually these kind of big collapses are what draw rubberneckers over, and, you know, people parachute in to report on the devastation. So I imagine it had to get you hit some pain points and realize, like, oh, this is bad. And maybe there were some common themes, one of them being, you know, how far behind they are analytically and how they outsourced a lot of their analytics to do the bare minimum. But when it came to, like, in-house data and providing, their minor league affiliates with ways to improve and things they're doing poorly, like, that information was really hard to find, or sometimes the information contradicted each other because they didn't standardize things in a way that made sense. So, depending on which coach or which, analyst was working with it, like, they might be presenting some information that conflicts. So I think, when you look at everything, all the ways they can improve, like the idea of them hiring a certain amount of bodies for the analytics department, or at least, maybe somebody new in charge and, restructuring a little bit is one of the easiest ways they can do it. The Royals are a good example. There's a Britt Giroli article at The Athletic talking about how the Royals were, they're in a similar position. And we've joked a lot about how the Royals are always the example the White Sox point to. But here's a case where they fired Dayton Moore, went to one of his top lieutenants. They got worse and they realized like, oh, this can't happen again. And so they really worked on the information that they were working with. They improved their defense. They improved their free agent hit rates a little bit. And, then capped off with Bobby Witt Jr. being a near MVP, or at least MVP in some seasons, if you weren't competing with Aaron Judge. Now they're a postseason team, not quite a division winner, but they're going to the playoffs. And that's the foundation they're talking about. So I think with the White Sox, like, we should be able to track, and they should be willing to brag about if they hire front office people who are directly adding to the analytics. Like, they've been cagey about it before. They haven't gone in detail. They haven't allowed employees to conduct interviews, and Rick Hahn saying, well, the people listed aren't all the people we work with, and you don't know if that's true or not. And now we learn that that pretty much is true. And like, the outsourcing is largely ineffective. But if they are looking at getting better in this particular way, if they're looking for stories that aren't about wins and losses, because there are going to be a lot more losses than wins still, this would be one area where they should be willing to open up the hood a little bit and say, like, here's how we're doing better. Kind of like Brian Bannister, how good he was with the media and how he presented a forward thinking way of approaching pitching. And you saw some of the results of that this year. I'm hoping that, should they, add several people to the analytics department, and the Royals added 6, according to Giroli's article. Some teams have like twice as many employees as the White Sox do, but I think if you're the White Sox, you probably want to add 5 to 10 at a time. So you're not, having 20 people who might be working on the same thing and presenting different. You want to have the information standardized first. So I think fewer bodies, or just a certain amount of people every year versus trying to do it all in one fell swoop is probably a smarter way. Get people working on something, figure out where you're still coming up short, and then keep adding, or keep moving people around until you're getting people asking the right questions, answering them in a way that everybody agrees with. Like, it probably takes a few years if you don't know how to do it. If you're not bringing in Andrew Friedman to do it for your organization himself and knowing exactly what works. So I would hope 5 to 10 this year, or this winter. And when I look at the front office listings next March or April, hopefully we'll see a bunch of new names.
The Los Angeles Dodgers, who share a spring training facility with the Chicago White Sox, have 5 corporate levels in their hierarchy when it comes to baseball operations. They have staff, they have assistant managers, they have managers, they have directors, and they have senior directors before you get to the VPs of their organization. So I guess you could argue they have 6 levels of corporate hierarchy within their baseball operations. And to your point, that's been built over many, many years. The White Sox have 2 levels. They have directors and then people that work underneath them. They have a long way to go. The Dodgers have over 70 employees on their website. You go to Dodgers.com, look at front office. They got over 70 employees on that page. Do the White Sox even have 70 employees total on their page?
Yeah, they have 43 by my count. The Rays have like 120. They structure it a little bit differently, so depending on like where you cut it off, it might be fewer than that. But yeah, I would say I'm comfortable saying the Rays have twice the amount of bodies that the White Sox do.
And with so many teams now pulling back on pro scouts because, well, quite frankly, the data is so dependable on BaseballSavant.com, and so many teams over the years with the analytics department have built their own projection models, have multiple analysis, which that's their full-time job to review all this type of data. And now you're able to get all the data as well from the minor league ballparks. Not everything is public, but the AAA data is public. That's why with our analysis of Colson Montgomery, we've been kind of like raising the red flag. And I think everybody understands who've been listening to this podcast every single week why Colson Montgomery is now going to the Arizona Fall League. He had a good September, but there's significant issues here before he gets to the major leagues, especially his ability to handle velocity. And he needs multiple swings because right now he just has one kind of swing and it doesn't work for all pitches. We're able to know that without having to go watch every Colson Montgomery game because you can't hide anymore as a baseball player. All these stadiums have Doppler radars. All these stadiums have TrackMan. So it's not only just cost efficient, but it might be smarter to have multiple analysts take in this data. Now, I still think that there's value to having scouts to have eyes to see and how guys fit into a clubhouse. Because, boy, the White Sox haven't been great at that in recent seasons. Maybe you can count this season as an exception. It seems like everybody liked each other. But it is a bit surprising that now Jerry Reinsdorf wants to buy into this. It's taken 121 losses and the worst season in modern baseball history for Jerry Reinsdorf to decide, you know what, we should start doing what everyone else has been doing. I don't know how long it's going to take for the White Sox to eventually catch up, but I'm with you. It's one thing to grow your staff. I'm curious on what type of people that Chris Getz is aiming for. Maybe he'll be trying to pick some people from the Dodgers to bring over to the White Sox and see in what areas that they can improve upon. We've seen the benefits with Brian Bannister on the pitching side, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely done that, but I think throughout this offseason, and everybody's right, especially the comment section, social media, man, this offense stinks. The offenses weren't that great for the White Sox minor league affiliates as well. This is a gigantic red flag. This is a huge concern. Where are the bats going to come from? And maybe, just maybe, this new focus on analytics helps with the White Sox offensively moving forward.
Yeah, I think the cynical read on this is that they do it for a year. They get back to like losing 97 games, and then Reinsdorf is like, all right, we're good. Let's hold off on more hires and get back to winning baseball Tony La Russa knows about. So I'm taking it a year at a time.
That's fair. I think that's a very fair approach, Jim. Because La Russa probably falls in the Kenny Williams category. I can watch a hitter batting practice for 15 minutes and know they're an all-star. Okay, sure. Sure. Yeah. Well, the White Sox offense definitely came out to play in their final game of the season, shockingly scoring 9 runs, and even a bigger shocker. Entering the final week, we thought the White Sox would go 1-5. Instead, they go 5-1. They win another road series. They won 2 road series this season. And again, they finished 41 and 121 overall. Andrew Benintendi, Jim, he reached 20 homers. Somebody did it. He did it. So congratulations to Andrew Benintendi. That ties a career high. But I'm a little upset, Jim. Despite the White Sox setting a new record for most losses in franchise history, some way, somehow, they allowed fewer runs than last season, and I lose the steak dinner bet by 6 runs.
Damn you, Brian Bannister. Take back what you said.
Oh, the White Sox had their best month of the season in September. I think they went, 10-15? It's the only month of the season the White Sox won double-digit games.
Yeah, it felt like if you play any EA game or like any kind of sports video game, the show, etc., Madden, where you have the degree of difficulty dialed up, and no matter how big you're leading, like you'll get some glitches where the computer will narrow the gap,
the rubber band effect,
either come back all the way or at least, yeah. And it feels like the same thing here. Like they set the loss record, but only by 1. Like there's something correcting. There's a governor on the system that prevents any team from really breaking it that badly. So like if you're going to set a new record, it's going to be, incremental as it gets, one loss. They could have, set it by 4 or 5, but instead, just 1 and 3 games. It looked like they might avoid sole ownership. And like they lost in the opener of the Detroit series to to puncture the balloon and make it less dramatic, but still 5 out of 6. It was funny, listening to the Detroit broadcast and how they're still celebrating and such and talking about, oh, you don't want to face this team in October. I was thinking, you just kind of lost a road series, the White Sox. Only one their team had done that. Might want to be careful about, having momentum-based arguments about your postseason viability if you just let the White Sox beat you 2 out of 3 in your home park to end the season.
Though we'll get to our MLB postseason predictions. I strongly feel those were the last 2 home games for Detroit this season. 1 game, clearly hung over. I feel bad for them. They clinched the postseason, and they got a 12 o'clock start the next day. Like, that's super mean. And then I guess the benefit is that they could go celebrate and have a steak dinner Saturday night with all their friends and teammates and family. But they have to turn around and still play a Sunday game. That Tigers offense, we'll see on how they perform against the Houston Astros. Like I said, the postseason predictions, we'll have that in a moment here on the podcast. But Jason Benetti does get the last laugh, Jim. And to hype it up, Jason did sit down with our James Fegan, so we'll have that story upcoming this week on SoxMachine.com. Something for you guys to look forward to as we kick off our offseason coverage. But to see Jason be in that clubhouse for the Detroit Tigers, still a bit shocking that they found a way at the very end. They played very good baseball after July 1st, some of the best baseball in Major League Baseball. And reaching the postseason and him getting beer and champagne sprayed at him, I think it's a good moment for Jason. This was a risk for him to opt out of his contract with the White Sox, go over to Detroit, surprising a lot of folks. First half of the season, the Tigers were very vanilla, very mediocre. But he gets the last laugh because he got to broadcast a game in which Detroit clinches the playoff spot for the first time in a decade, and the White Sox clinch the worst record in modern baseball history.
Well, it's funny. I listened to them more than Schriffen for the weekend, just to kind of catch up with an old friend in a way. The Detroit broadcast, when it comes to say like the whole Bally Sports experience, some of the gambling heavy discussions at some point, or the promos and the rotating cast of analysts, not that impressive. So the broadcast itself kind of sometimes feels a little bit cheaper, or maybe a little bit less substantial than like a Benetti Steve Stone broadcast, because Stone's voice is just he's etched into a lot of baseball fans' brains. It's kind of like the standard bearer, I think, for somebody who can endure in a broadcast booth and sound pretty current, no matter how many teams he's called for, and no matter, what I guess he believes fundamentally as a baseball analyst. Like, he can modify his language to be current over, generations. So when it comes to the analyst part, like, I still think they could probably find better to work with Benetti, and we'll see what happens to the Bally Sports fallout. I think it's instructive, I think, for a lot of people, perhaps not necessarily only in baseball or only with White Sox, but like in a lot of jobs, to where you think you're in your dream job and turns out to not be all you thought it cracked up to be, or maybe your priorities changed and you feel pressure like, oh, I should be happy here. This is what I thought I should be doing. And realizing like, I don't feel appreciated, or I feel like I'm not maximizing my skill set or not learning new things, and just want to be somewhere else. And taking that chance and watching it pay off, I think, should be, it can be motivation for people who feel stuck, because Benetti could have called White Sox games forever probably and been unhappy about it, or tried to wait out people who, were signing his checks and hoping things got better, or compromising his style, but he thought he could do more somewhere else and be appreciated. And he has no regrets, it seems. So good for him.
Yes, good for Jason. He won't call any of the postseason games, I believe, because none are going to be on Fox, especially the opening round. They're mostly going to be on ABC and ESPN. But if Detroit surprises, maybe he gets a chance helping out with the Fox baseball broadcast as the postseason series extend into the division and championship series rounds. Where does he land on the pecking order, though? Is he behind? He's definitely behind Joe Davis. He's number one for baseball. Is Adam Amin number two for Fox? And then Jason Benetti?
Maybe. Yeah, the Amin Pierzynski booth. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they have the American League still. I have to look into that. Maybe Jason gets a chance to call a divisional series when Fox picks up on those broadcasts. But still a cool sight to see, and a bit jarring to go from broadcasting a 101 loss team in 2023, shocking everyone before the season started, opted out, went to Detroit, and he got to call a wild finish for the Detroit Tigers, and the Tigers are now going to the postseason. But I guess the White Sox, they get a chuckle as well. Again, they won that last series of the season and winning 5 of their last 6 games. But as I mentioned in the podcast intro, Jim, this momentum is not going to carry over to spring training. It is not something that you could build upon, that you could say 2025 is going to be so much better because the White Sox won 5 of their last 6 games in 2024. But with how hard the White Sox players did play for Grady Sizemore and how they've been pretty outspoken about how much they enjoyed playing for Grady Sizemore. Even Justin Jerschley had positive things to say to Scott Merkin, who is the MLB.com White Sox beat reporter, of course, about working with Grady Sizemore. Does this last week, do you think, have any influence on Chris Getz's thinking of approaching this vacancy at White Sox manager?
I don't think so. I think Sizemore's under contract for 1 more year, so they could probably use him in different capacities. And having read what Rick Hahn hoped to get out of AJ Hinch, having read what the Royals got out of hiring Matt Quatraro and Paul Hoover from the Rays, it does seem like there is value in having an analytically inclined manager in the dugout to help you with what kind of information they want to get. They need to see what they're used to getting in other organizations. That's what it seemed like Hahn was hoping to get with Hinch, to maybe help steer the White Sox, because he couldn't do it alone. He couldn't convince Kenny Williams or Jerry Reinsdorf to, maybe change the composition in the front office, but maybe Hinch, especially if the earlier turns are positive and, he has some influence, could help him be an ally in that fight. So I think if Getz saw that up close and has seen it elsewhere in the division, I still think like he hires from the outside. And that's why I think Sergio Santos too, isn't quite, maybe the right guy at this time. Just because he had a couple years at the Yankees, but also didn't really have a whole lot say in how the Yankees did things, to where, I don't know if I would trust him to help me guide the information that channels down to the dugout. But I think when it comes to the new manager, whether they hire from Dodgers, Clayton McCullough was one that Bruce Levine mentioned coming over from the Dodgers, and being that guy, that's, I imagine, the kind of hire the White Sox might make. If they hire 5 or 10 people to the front office and analytic role, helping to maintain that momentum, because you're having your manager in the dugout saying, great, here's what else we need. Good start with what you provided. I had your coaches last year tell me what you're getting. This is better, but still, here's what the Dodgers had. Here's what we don't have. Let's keep going. I think that's what he needs in the dugout. And while Sizemore, I think, was a good, almost like a life coach, almost like somebody who was, very supportive to players as they're going through the worst. Might not have been the worst for their professional careers, because he had a lot of players who might not be in major league dugouts. And I think being in the major league dugout of the worst team ever, or at least losing his team ever, is better than being on a very good AAA team. So I wouldn't necessarily call it professional nadirs, but maybe major league nadirs. I think Sizemore was the right guy for just surviving the season, keeping chins up, providing purpose. But I think if you're looking at trying to restructure everything, your entire approach for the front office. I think you need a manager who has some idea of how it's done elsewhere and can help, create an ally for Chris Getz, help create somebody who, can also be in Reinsdorf's ear. If Reinsdorf says, like, how's it going? Like, he can answer him in a way that will agree with Getz. I think that's what he needs right now.
Those are really good points, Jim. Bob Nightingale of USA Today in his Sunday Notebook column also mentioned that Carlos Beltran, who's currently a special assistant for the New York Mets, could be in the running an interview with the Chicago White Sox. So that's another name.
And that would fit as well.
Yes. We'll see what the White Sox do. Again, that is the number one offseason item for the Chicago White Sox. We're probably at least a month away before the White Sox make that decision, especially with how all the postseason could shake out and which teams are still in the race, as the White Sox don't want to serve as a big distraction from what is going on and still seeking permissions from other teams to interview people. But we've been told multiple times that Chris Getz has a process. He's got a list. It's a very good process, Jim. It's a very good list.
He's checking it twice.
We'll see what comes to fruition for the White Sox in their next managerial hire.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Shop Macy's VIP sale, going on now. Use your coupon or Macy's card and take an extra 30% off the latest fall trends from designers that rarely go on sale. And save 15% off skincare, makeup, fragrances, and more. Plus, shop fall specials for even more great deals on top brands at Macy's. Savings off regular and already reduced prices. Exclusions apply.
Well, that's the White Sox. Well, in our future podcast episodes, we'll have our report card. We're going to have our fun facts episode as well. I worked on that over the weekend. Some very eye-opening metrics, stats, things that we didn't keep track during the season, but taking that deep dive into StatHead on BaseBallReference.com was a doozy in some areas. So that'll be our future podcast episodes as we shift to once a week going into the offseason rather than twice a week. But the Major League Baseball postseason starts on Tuesday. But before we get there, there is a critical doubleheader that's happening between the Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets. Game 1 of that doubleheader is going to start at 12:10 p.m. Central Time. These games are going to be on ESPN2, so if you are working or working from home, if you have a second screen, you could have these games on. So what's at stake here? Well, the Braves, Mets, and Diamondbacks all have the same record. So for the Diamondbacks to make it into the postseason, they need either the Braves or Mets to sweep the doubleheader. If the doubleheader is split, in which the Braves win a game and the Mets win a game, the Diamondbacks are out. So kind of fascinating here. And with the expanded postseason, we don't get game 163s anymore. Jim, how do you feel about this type of tiebreaker situation with the Diamondbacks outside looking in, I guess? I mean, it's a weird thing for a Diamondbacks fan to be like, whoever wins game 1, we are super rooting for you hard to win in game 2.
I miss game 163 for this reason, is just having one. Yeah, it's more satisfying to have like a winner takes all game at the very end of the year versus it coming down to head-to-head records, division records, etc. It does create a weird potential allyship between the Braves and Mets. Like, yeah, I saw people saying, well, why didn't they just agree to forfeit? Like Mets forfeit game 1, Braves forfeit game 2, and they each come out with a win and they both go to the postseason. And we're seeing like them stagger their pitchers and trying to I think it seems like they're trying to make the pitching matchups uneven to where one team's likely to win one and one team's and if that team follows through with the win in game 1, then they can take it easy with game 2, knowing they're in and can rest all their relevant pitchers for the postseason, and that should open up the other team to win. But given that they're division opponents, given that they don't, I presume they don't like each other. The fan bases certainly don't like each other. Like, I wonder, like, if there is a case of just, I'd rather eliminate that team because the Diamondbacks are more of a foreign foe to us, than allow them to stay in the postseason longer. Like, I wonder if that impulse kicks in at any point to be like, we can end it for these guys if they're in game 2, and just, realizing there's a chance to go for the jugular, even if they are using a pitcher that they might want to rest for the series. I'm interested in that human component of this.
Tyler McGill is going to start game 1 of the doubleheader for the Mets. It's going to be Spencer Schwellenbach for the Atlanta Braves starting game 1. If the Mets win game 1, they're going to save Luis Severino for the wild card series. And if they don't win game 1, Luis Severino will start game 2. For the Atlanta Braves, if they win game 1, they're going to save Chris Sale. If they don't win game 1, Chris Sale is going to start the second game. That is great news for a team like the San Diego Padres, because it makes it almost impossible for them having to face Chris Sale in the wild card round. So that's what's fascinating here. To Jim's point, depending on how game 1 goes will depend on who is starting in game 2. If the Mets win game 1, they're going to save Luis Severino. Maybe they go to a bullpen game. A bullpen game against Chris Sale, who would have to start game 2. But if the Braves win game 1, then the Braves are going to save Chris Sale, and we'll see what they do in game 2. Not a great situation for Arizona to be in. Hoping for a sweep. But I'll be watching those games, and I know many of you will be as well. Again, first pitch for game 1 is at 12:10 p.m. Central Time, and then game 2 will start shortly after for the Braves and Mets. But this leads now to our postseason predictions, and sometimes we're good with these, a lot of times we're not. But with our postseason predictions, we're going to start in the American League. So we'll go through that side of the bracket first, and then pick who is going to be our American League pennant winner, and then we'll move over to the National League. So starting the American League, your third seed is the Houston Astros. They're going to face the 6th seed Detroit Tigers. So AJ Hinch goes back to Houston in the postseason. The number 4 seed, the Baltimore Orioles, are facing the number 5 seed, the Kansas City Royals. So Jim, between the Astros and Tigers, who do you like in that 3-game series?
Well, I tipped my hand a little bit with it earlier by saying the White Sox beat them 2 out of 3. So why should we feel inspired by them? So I will go with the Astros. Just when it comes to Tigers, they feel, and this will tip my hand for a subsequent prediction, but has that, they have the makings of the Guardians when, the Guardians get in with like a really good pitching staff and a 2-man offense. And you think like, oh, the Guardians are just, they have the pitching to compete with anybody, but then they don't hit home runs or they don't score. They can't put the pressure on a pitching staff to knock out a starter early, and they aren't able to get to the bullpen and wear out a bullpen. So it all comes down to their pitching staff holding together and making the right moves. And I don't know if the Tigers have enough of that. So I will go with the Astros.
I'm going with the Astros as well. Pay attention to the status of Yordan Alvarez. He may not be available for this first round. And Tarek Skubal most likely is going to be the American League Cy Young winner. So Detroit could have game 1 advantage on the pitching rubber. But again, the Houston Astros have made it to 7 consecutive American League Championship Series. There's an overwhelming postseason experience advantage for the Astros. So that's why I like the Astros to also beat the Tigers. Orioles, Royals. This is a really interesting 3-game series. Who do you like in this one?
I would have said Orioles, just reflexively, especially before the season. I thought, the Orioles will win 95 games and the Royals would be barely scraping in, and some weird, just collapse of the American League to where like a 79-win team got in there somehow. And the Royals played well at the end. The Orioles have been better as of late, but not quite there. So I'm going to say in a short series like this, I like the Royals a little bit better than the Orioles. Like, I think if it were a longer series, I would go with the Orioles because I don't trust the Royals bullpen. But I think when it comes to the starters the Royals have, I think you can guard a bullpen a little bit easier and avoid the kind of late inning jeopardy that often befalls Kansas City when they're going poorly. And I think they get by this round.
I agree with you. I also have the Royals upsetting the Orioles. The Royals are going to have Cole Reagans go game 1, Seth Lugo going game 2, and if game 3 is necessary, Michael Wacha. Corbin Burns been great for Baltimore, but the depth at starting pitching for the Orioles has been a struggle this season as they've been fighting off injuries. The bullpen is not as strong as it was last year. If the Orioles move ahead, they really need this to be a shootout in baseball terms. They really need their offense to click against what has been a very strong starting pitching staff, surprisingly strong pitching staff for the Kansas City Royals. So I'm with you, Jim, in a 3-game series. I'd like the Royals to upset the Orioles, which means we both have the Royals facing the New York Yankees in the next round, and we both have the Houston Astros against the Cleveland Guardians. So in that New York versus Kansas City division matchup, a 5-game series, who do you like with that one?
I'm looking at the Guardians right now, and second half offense, they had a 676 OPS, 5th worst in the American League. Stephen Kwan wasn't there. David Fry wasn't there. Like some of their first half heroes that really helped disperse the offense more evenly and get off the Jose Ramirez reliant lineup formulations that had worked for them. It seemed like it faded out. There were some injury issues a little bit, and it all, Jose Ramirez stepped up once again, almost a 40-40 season, and bailed him out. And, they had a relatively easy ride to the rest of the AL Central, but I think they're running the same problems that they always do. It's kind of Ramirez and Naylor, and then like who else? So that's why I think I have them falling out here.
So you have the Astros over the Guardians.
Yes.
So between the Yankees and Royals, who do you like in that one?
I have the Yankees just because, between having 2 Bobby Witts versus 1, which is kind of how you have to look at their offense. Bobby Witt's been awesome, but when you have like Judge and Soto, and we saw with the White Sox just how hard it is to negotiate both of them in the same lineup, righty and lefty, hard for bullpens to get through them. They've had a little bit better luck in terms of getting guys from injury back into the rotation and such. So I think they're a bit more well-rounded. Their bullpen's a little bit more proven in terms of having a pretty deep bullpen, whereas the Royals, have like a pretty, it's thinner. And I think their path towards a victory is a lot narrower when it comes to kind of results they've been getting out of relievers. So I think I will say Yankees here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have both the Yankees and the Astros moving forward. The Royals, though, could make that a tough series for the Yankees. Yankees need some more consistency when it comes to their starting pitching. It could be all over the place. So I wouldn't put it past that the Royals make this a lot tougher on the Yankees than expected, especially those games at Kauffman Stadium, which should be a very raucous crowd. But I'm with you. The Guardians and the Astros, the Guardians have played tough, but it's hard for your outstanding bullpen, your world-class bullpen. They can't do much if you don't have a lead to hand it off to them, and that's where I have concerns about the Guardians against the Astros. All right, so the Astros making to the American League Championship Series for the 8th consecutive year, just insane, against the New York Yankees. Who do you like in that for an American League Championship Series?
I'm going with the Astros just because I picked them as my American League champion in my preseason predictions, and I got the American League so woefully wrong that I really need the Astros to bail me out in terms of it's kind of like picking the NCAA champion at the end, an otherwise terrible bracket, or picking the championship game. Like that helps salvage a lot of points in a pool, and I really need the Astros to come through here. So
I get it. I am going the other direction. I have the Yankees beating the Astros to make it into the World Series. Mostly because of that offense. And we'll see what the status of Yordan Alvarez. But with the way that Juan Soto and the way that Juan Soto's hit in the past in the postseason, I think the Yankees offensively just have enough. But that should be a great American League Championship Series. That could go 7 games easily between those two teams. All right, so that means moving over to the National League. And moving over to the National League, we're going to have to make a prediction on how we think this wild card's going to go down. How do you think this wild card goes down, Jim? Do you think it's going to be a split, or do you see either team sweeping the 2 games?
I think it'll be a split. I am fascinated though. Like I'm hoping that the Mets win game 1 and force Chris Sale to pitch game 2, because like with our experience as White Sox fans, and because they ran on such thin margins for being competitive, like they always needed Chris Sale to win big games, and like his record was mixed. And that's partially because he's human, partially because like he pitched a lot of innings and tended to wear down as the season went on because he was clearing 200 innings every year. So when you need those big games, must win or, likely matchups, like a lot of times kind of fell flat, or maybe went an inning too long and got roughed up. So I am interested to see like how he finishes what should be a Cy Young season, unless something disastrous happens, given that he's currently winning the Triple Crown for pitchers right now. But I want to see him in that setting. Maybe that is game 1, but I think make or break game to get in the postseason at all. I want to see Chris Sale pitch in that game.
I agree with you. I think they split. So that means the Mets are going to Milwaukee and the Braves going to San Diego. So that 3 seed versus 6 seed matchup, the Milwaukee Brewers and New York Mets. Who do you like that in a 3-game series?
My heart says the Brewers because I want them. Yeah, like they're a fun team. Like I watch a lot of their prospects come through in Nashville. And like watching them there, and then they integrate them well into the major league lineup, and they always seem to come with successful plans for maximizing skill sets. And I really admire the way that they sold basically at the winter. They took it as like a step back here, it seemed, by trading Corbin Burns and they saw Craig Counsell go to Chicago and being like, maybe we don't put all our eggs in this basket. We work on getting some of our, Churio, and get our new outfield Frelick calibrated, and then maybe we'll push for it again next year. And then they won the Central pretty easily. So I want to see them rewarded for their creativity, but I think the Mets just like them a little bit more, given the way that the Brewers kind of stall out because of perhaps their lack of upper echelon talent. Frelick got hurt, so that kind of throws their defense. He looks like the Gold Glover for right field, and one of the few guys who's like on a per game rate as impressive as Dominic Fletcher is in right field, except he's been doing it for more of a season. So I wonder how that affects the composition if he's out. And I think they run on kind of thin margins for having their best team out there. And so I think the Mets might be a little bit more likely if they are able to get through with their pitching plans intact.
I am Milwaukee over the New York Mets. I think Jackson Chourio is going to have a big series, and this is going to be his opportunity to break out on a big stage for the Milwaukee Brewers. And being at home, I think it'll help be the edge for Milwaukee. So I like the Brewers to advance over the Mets. Atlanta at San Diego in a short 3-game series. Who do you like in that one?
San Diego. Clinching a postseason spot in triple play gives them a team of destiny feel, but also it feels like a miracle that the Braves are getting to the postseason at all because of just how many bodies they've lost along the way, and how their pitching staff has got gutted by injuries and such. That Chris Sale being a flyer now is like the most critical part of their entire pitching staff, and Reynaldo Lopez, who is an extra starter, maybe can get him to a 5th starter very carefully, and then it turns out they need every single inning from him. And his availability is kind of iffy right now, given that he got hurt later in the year. That I think that you call it a success if you're a Braves fan, if you're in the Braves front office, saying we got to October and a loss to a team that's playing as well as the Padres is no small or is no huge blow. I think you just take it as being beat by a more complete team.
I also have the San Diego Padres over the Atlanta Braves. Moving over to the division series, Jim, you got 2 big division rivals going up against each other. You got Philadelphia against the New York Mets, and we both have Los Angeles Dodgers against the San Diego Padres. I have Milwaukee against Philadelphia. Philadelphia was my preseason pick to win the World Series this year. I'm still riding with them, especially at home. So I like Philadelphia over Milwaukee, but in this division rivalry here between the Mets and Phillies, who do you like in that one?
I like the Phillies. Also, they were my preseason pick, but recently, reading articles about like how Bryce Harper has embraced first base and how you had Nick Castellanos. I linked to this in Spare Parts post on Sunday, talking about how great it is to play for an owner who is not worried about his bottom line every year, and how great it is to work or play for a general manager who knows what he's doing. And realizing like the White Sox could have had both of those, and just didn't, not Castellanos, but it could have had a Harper, could have had a general manager who inspired confidence. And because of the small-minded way the White Sox are run, just did not have the vision to provide that. And I like seeing good processes being rewarded, and I think the way that the Phillies run are the team I'd like to root for. So I am putting my National League eggs in that basket, just because I want to see good things happen. I want to have good examples to point to, like the way the Rangers won last year with like investing heavily in free agents, Corey Seager and Marcus Semien, and being like, hey, sometimes you can spend your way to a World Series champion. I like seeing the way the Phillies have been built, and using momentum, like the way the Twins fell apart because they cut payroll after winning a division and paying the price for that. Like, I'm glad that a poor process like that and the way they took fan interest for granted, they were punished for that. And so I think, for the Phillies, I like seeing them reinvest and keep adding and keep, same thing with the Padres. Another good example of the way the Padres kept, they brought fans in, and then they kept giving fans a reason to stay invested. So that's why I'm rooting for the Phillies here. And also, I think they're a good team.
So then Los Angeles and San Diego, 5-game series. Shohei Ohtani is just unreal right now with the way that he ended his season. 54 homers, 59 stolen bases. I think he's batting over 700 the last couple of weeks against the San Diego Padres. And the Padres won the season series against the Dodgers. Who do you like between the Dodgers and Padres in a 5-game series?
This is a tough one for me because I do like, and it's another case of the Dodgers like being the team that always tries to do it the best that any team can do it in terms of just the amount they spend, amount of resources, as you talked about with the front office, and how they don't take any edge for granted. The Padres putting a scare into them late in the year, but having Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and Ohtani closing out the year, they did. Like, I do want to see Ohtani in the postseason here, so I'm pulling for the Dodgers a little bit. I mean, I want to see a good series. Like, basically, this is a series I think I have the highest hopes for just drama, mutual loathing, like the Padres having the little brother attitude and wanting to stick it to him. High hopes for this one. So I think it's going to be the Dodgers, but would not be upset by any outcome because I do enjoy both teams.
I have the Padres upsetting the Dodgers. I'm really concerned about the Dodgers starting pitching. And especially against the San Diego offense. If they have to tap into that well early, it could make it for a very difficult situation for Dave Roberts to navigate through when that series goes back to San Diego. If the Padres can steal a game in Los Angeles, I think the Dodgers are at serious risk of being upsetted, even though they're the number 1 seed here. And I think it's going to spark a lot of conversations in the offseason that the Dodgers must address starting pitching again and find ways to keep their starting pitchers healthy as they get into the postseason. And that's why I think the Dodgers are probably the most popular team in the Garrett Crochet trade sweepstakes this upcoming offseason. They could really use a Garrett Crochet right now. But Jim's got the Dodgers over Padres. I have the Padres over the Dodgers, meaning Jim's got the Phillies and Dodgers in the National League Championship Series. I have the Phillies and Padres again. So between the Phillies and Dodgers, Jim, who do you like to win the pennant?
Well, I tipped my hand here earlier, but yeah, the Phillies this is where I think, the Dodgers might be able to scrape by one series with thin pitching because, I think, when it comes to teams that are reliant on the bullpen, that tends to reveal itself over a 7-game series, multiple exposures, pitching on consecutive days, going 2 innings when they normally go 1 because the starter only lasted 3 innings. That's when you see those pitching plans get compromised more. So I think the Phillies are in a position to where they can expose that. And so I will go Phillies.
Yeah, I agree. I have the Phillies, of course, with mine facing the Padres. The Phillies would have home field advantage And I know there's been a lot of articles lately about how there is no such thing as home field advantage, especially in recent years in the postseason. But it matters a lot to the Phillies. The Phillies have been great this year at home. And with their starting pitching, and again, just the postseason success that they have had and the lineups, I mean, it would be a fantastic, both of these would be amazing National League Championship Series. Dodgers, Phillies, or Padres, Phillies. But I do have the Phillies edging the Padres to make it back to the World Series. So our World Series matchups, Jim, you got the Houston Astros against the Philadelphia Phillies. I got the New York Yankees against the Philadelphia Phillies. Both of these are rematches in World Series history. Between the Astros and Phillies, who do you like?
I like the Phillies to validate my preseason predictions.
And I'm with you as well. I've got the Phillies beating the New York Yankees. So we're both on the Philadelphia train to not only make it to the World Series, but to win it. And I think that will do Bryce Harper doesn't have to worry about his legacy, because I think he's on the Hall of Fame track, clearly. And when it comes to sports, we talk about how LeBron James not only has met the hype when he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a teenager, but has exceeded that hype. Bryce Harper, for me, on the baseball front, is right there as well. But unlike LeBron James, Harper wasn't with the Nationals when they won the World Series. He was already with the Phillies. So I think that's the only thing that is missing for Bryce Harper is that World Series ring. And man, I think he's just going to be the postseason MVP. Like, I think Bryce Harper is going to turn on a switch in this postseason and carry the Phillies to another championship.
Yeah, I'd be curious when it comes to, I think it's probably a question for Dan Szymborski, but when you look at the various Zips projections for like what his first 13 years in the majors might look like, or maybe like after 2013, especially when we started like really finding it and being like a clearly above average offensive player, like how you project him as a 20-year-old going through his 20s, and wondering like what percentile did he hit for outcomes? Because when you look at it, like, over a 900 career OPS, 336 homers, like he's paled in comparison to a little bit because like his peak seasons haven't been as peaky as like Aaron Judge and Mike Trout was, just blowing numbers out of the water for like early career success. And so he is like running second to him, which is, not a problem, but except maybe if you're Bryce Harper and you're supposed to be that guy instead of Mike Trout, and then, missing the boat in the World Series by a year. There are gaps in it, but also baseball is so difficult that having a 13-year stretch where you are, one of the most valuable players in the league, like every other year, he's had some injuries here and there that have sapped his effectiveness some years, but he's always been like above average no matter what. And then when he puts it all together, he's one of the best players in the league, and doing that year after year and signing a huge contract with the Phillies, 6 years into it, no regrets, which I think is impressive, for any kind of contract that's, 13, 14 years in length you're talking about, that both sides could be that happy with it. That, I think his career is probably not going as well as you could think, but I would imagine like that's got to be like 75th percentile, just because of how one injury could just change everything. And so far it has not.
Bryce Harper turns 32 on October 16th. So during the postseason, he'll have a birthday. And for his career, according to baseballreference.com, he's already at 51 WAR. So is it realistic to continue to think that he's a 900 OPS type of batter, which he was 898 this year? Can he do it for 3 more years? Can he hit 90 more homers in the next 3 years and get to 436? I don't know if he gets to 500 homers, but he's got a Rookie of the Year award. He's got 2 MVPs in his cabinet, multiple All-Star awards. He should reach 60-plus WAR for his career. Yeah, I'm pretty confident that Bryce Harper he's going to be a Hall of Famer. And I think, again, with this postseason, if he can help the Phillies get to the World Series and win it, I think that will definitely cement his legacy as a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, I'm looking at Mike Trout now just to see how far behind Harper was, and Trout's at 86 wins above replacement. So basically like a 35 win gap. And, it's part of the fun of baseball though, is like Trout is, he was the preeminent player in baseball for a decade, basically. And when you look at how little the Angels were able to make of that versus Harper, being an exciting player for multiple markets, getting the postseason World Series with multiple markets, and being that kind of marketable player, the fan favorite, and you kind of more electrifying version of a ball player than Trout is. You can't, that doesn't make up 30 wins alone in terms of production, but I think, it's a case of Harper being, even if you compare him head to head, like, wouldn't be disappointed with Bryce Harper's career with the way it's rolled out. Like, he looks like he's having fun. He looks like he doesn't have many regrets about the way his career has unfolded, like even if he's running a distant second. So yeah, that's, I think, part of the fun of just the way baseball is, both individual and team pursuits, that he's been able to make a lot of it as well.
Bryce Harper, for his career in 49 postseason games, has a 996 OPS.
Yeah, he shows up. Like
he does. He certainly does. 16 homers in 49 postseason games.
Yeah, they make it to the World Series. That's one thing. He didn't get a postseason win with the Nationals. So he had some good performances here and there. He got walked a ton and won, but so he does have that on his Nationals resume, or lack of it, is the lack of October transcendence. But yeah, with the Phillies, since he's gotten there, he's flipped a different switch.
Yep, won the NLCS MVP back in 2022. Like I said, I think he's going to be the postseason MVP. I think, Harper's going to flip a switch and just dominate this postseason, which says a lot because, again, Shohei Ohtani is on another level right now, and I am sure that he, as we have seen, especially even things like the World Baseball Classic, Ohtani also has that switch where he can elevate his game, which is incredibly scary to think about. The National League, I think, is going to be more fun to watch than the American League with this upcoming postseason, but hopefully we do get some great, exciting games to keep our attention throughout October. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Let us know about your guys' postseason predictions in the comments section, or hit us up as well on social media. You can follow us. We're at Sox Machine. You can follow James Fegan at JR Fegan. You can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show, of course, wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Sox Machine. You could also help continue to support us. We'll be writing every single day during the off season, and we have more interviews coming up and more features as well about what the Chicago White Sox are going to do as they make this transition during their rebuild and finding a new manager. You can gain full access to our coverage by signing up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. Monthly plans start at $5 a month. We also have additional tiers of support, which you get additional benefits as well. Check them out again at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.